All right, it's time for some good spooky fun because I'm talking about Arrow Video's Italian Gothic horror box set. This is a Blu-ray box set that they came out with last year that has 4 Italian Gothic horror films, all from the 1960s. I just picked this up and I went through the whole box set, watched all the movies, and I'm really excited to talk to you about them today. What's going on, my friends? Welcome again to the Cobwebs channel where we're dusting off the classics. My name is Daniel, and yeah, this box set is not brand new. It actually came out last year, but I really wanted to talk about this. Now, I fairly recently did a full video review of the new Severin Italian Gothic horror box set, and I actually got a request in the comments section to talk about this set. And at the time, I didn't have this, but I checked it out online, and I found I was able to get it for a really good price. It's actually going for less than $50 last time I checked. I got it for about 48 bucks. For a really high quality Arrow Video box set like this that comes with a hard shell case around 4 individual cases for each and every film, a booklet, and a poster. I thought that was a terrific value, and these were 4 movies I didn't know anything about that I thought would be really fun to go through. So the agenda of this video is I'm going to be showing off this box set, what comes inside, talk to you about each and every movie, tell you if I think this is worth it to pick up based on the films. Now, I do think packaging-wise it's definitely worth it. It's absolutely beautiful, but do you actually want to watch these movies? I'm going to talk about it and compare it to Severin's recent DANZA MACABRA Gothic horror box set. Which one's better? If you want to get into Italian Gothic horror, you want one of these box sets, which do I recommend? Let's get into it. So let's dig into this thing. When you slide all the contents out of the nice hard shell box, you're going to find 4 individual cases for each and every movie. One thing I noticed about them right away is they are much thinner than normal Arrow Video Blu-ray cases. Arrow Video Blu-ray cases are very thick, and then I realized, well, these are really just the size of a normal Blu-ray. So that's what you're getting, Arrow Video Blu-rays in a normal size case. So you get individual ones for each and every film. You also get a booklet that is very high quality, shows off each and every movie when it comes to cast and crew. And it has an essay called An Experiment in Terror, an Introduction to Italian Gothic. And it's got essays on each and every movie. It's very high quality. It's got pictures all through it. It's really, really nice. We also get a poster, which we can unfold like this. And it's double-sided, so you don't get a poster for each movie, but you get a poster for 2. Now, this right here is the poster for The Third Eye. Right there. It's this Italian poster, so you see the Italian title, as well as the Blancheville Monster, I believe is the title. The Blancheville Monster, the Blancheville Monster, I'm not totally sure, but its alternate title is just horror, so that's what you got here. The poster is not cheap. It feels great in your hands. It's really, really cool. So if you love Italian Gothic horror, this might be something you would love to have on your wall. So now that we're through all that, let's take a look at the movies. Now, the movies are very clearly split into 2 camps. You've got 2 that are very similar looking with similar color, a lot of dark gray. And these are the 2 traditional, totally classic period piece Gothic horror. Both of these are such obvious textbook examples of exactly what the Gothic horror genre was and is. And then these 2 are also very much of a piece. Here you've got like a very beige coloring to the both, and these are both modern day set films, in this case set in the 1960s when they were made. Both films that are Gothic horror films, but in less obvious ways. So it's very interesting how they split the 2 of these up. I thought we would start off talking about the more traditional Gothic horror films and kick off with Lady Morgan's Vengeance. All of these films are from the 1960s. All of them are in black and white, so you're not going to be getting some of that lush color that you might associate with Italian horror because of Dario Argento and a lot of films of Mario Bava, such as Blood and Black Lace and Kill Baby Kill, these lush color films. All of these are in black and white, and almost all of them you can watch in either Italian or English dub. And you don't have to feel bad about watching them in English dub. I myself love to watch classic Italian horror in English dub. I think it's part of the charm for me. But also with most of all these movies, there's no like pure version. There's not like the original Italian version and then like an English dub. These films in almost all cases are filmed without sound. And then they would dub over multiple different languages. So the English is a dub. The Italian is a dub too. But this is the one exception in that this was not dubbed into English. So this is the only one of these four you have to watch in Italian. And if you're like me and you don't speak Italian, you had to watch with subtitles. So what is this movie about? Well, if you're like me and you looked up the Letterboxd synopsis, you'll see that it's very spoilery. This film is very much split into two very distinct halves. And the Letterboxd synopsis only focuses on the second half, which is a big spoiler for how the first half goes, which is kind of a bummer. But it's also kind of hard to sell this movie and not talk about the second half. So I'm going to do my best without actually spoiling it. But here's the thing. This movie starts off a very typical gaslight story. It is a woman who falls in love with a man, even though she's betrothed to a man that she doesn't love, who seems to want her for her money. The man that she loves is tragically killed, and she ends up having to marry the other guy, and the other guy is clearly trying to gaslight her into thinking she's sick, into thinking she's crazy, so that he can take her money. And for all of that, the movie felt very stereotypical, and it was watchable. It had great atmosphere. This movie has, probably out of all of these, the best Gothic horror atmosphere, not just in terms of the sets and the costumes, but the constant fog, and there's castle, and there's a dungeon underneath. It's everything you could possibly want out of Gothic horror atmosphere. So I liked all that. But story-wise, it just felt very stereotypical, and I wasn't sure I was into it. Then the second half kicks in, and it turns from being this gaslight thriller into full-on crazy supernatural horror. It really puts the pedal to the metal with ghosts, ghostly vampires, a lot of really spooky stuff that's frankly awesome, that I really, really enjoyed. So I'm not going to get into exactly how that supernatural stuff comes into play. I'll let you see the movie for yourself. But just to tell you that if you're in the mood for a classic Gothic horror film with a lot of really great spooky horror going on, I think this one's going to be up your alley. This is probably my favorite of the bunch. So I'm starting off with the top. First of all, really, really enjoyed this movie. Had a total blast with it. A lot of these movies aren't super noteworthy from the cast, but if you're a fan of Gothic horror from this era, Italian, you might enjoy that Erica Blanca's in this movie. She is actually the female lead in Mario Bava's Kill Baby Kill, and she is a very cold, sinister presence in this movie. Really enjoyed her performance. Now, as far as special features, all of these movies come with an introduction from a guy who Arrow Video dubs an Italian cinema devotee. So he's essentially a big fan, but extremely knowledgeable. His name is Mark Thompson Ashworth. I enjoyed all of his introductions. I watched all of them. All of them were maybe around 5 minutes. Not going to take up too much of your time, but they give you a lot of information. All of these as well come with video essays, and a few of them even come with interviews, and I think there's a commentary on all of them as well. So these are pretty fantastic when it comes to the special feature category. Now let's go to the next stereotypical period piece Gothic film, and that's the Blancheville Monster, the Blancheville Monster. I'm not exactly sure how you say it. I don't remember them even saying it in the movie. What's funny is all of these have Italian titles, then they've got their American title on the front, and then when you watch the movie, I think like all of them came up with a different title that came up on the screen. So Italian films, they just had a lot of alternate titles. So what's this one about? Well, this film is heavily influenced by Edgar Allan Poe, but not just Poe himself, but the Roger Corman Poe adaptations that Roger Corman was making in the 60s with Vincent Price. This movie was kind of an attempt to capitalize on that. So it's about a woman who returns home from college to go home to her brother, whose name is Roderick. Turns out his name is not Roderick Usher, which is a little bit disappointing, just Roderick. She brings a friend, the friend's brother, who she's a little bit in love with, and you got some romance stuff going on there. But it turns out there is a really creepy guy who's wandering around the castle, the Blancheville Monster, this real gross looking dude right there. And Roderick is very obsessed with a family curse involving if a woman ages past 21, that there's going to be some horrible curse. So maybe this monster's trying to kill her or something like that. Here's the thing. This is definitely my least favorite of these movies. Was not a big fan of this movie, actually. It sets up a lot of really intriguing mystery in the first act. And then Roderick calls everybody in the room and just kind of lays all the mysteries out and kind of answers everything. And you're like, oh, okay. And then I swear the movie just kind of stops. It keeps going, but like nothing, it felt like nothing was happening for so long. And this movie made me really sleepy. Like I struggled, and I was not watching it real late at night. I was watching in the evening like I watch most movies. And I struggled to stay awake at parts during this movie. Now, when it comes to the end of the movie, turns out not all of the mysteries were revealed, and there is a twist, but it's a pretty obvious twist, not a terribly interesting twist, not really worth the time. Now, this is only 86 minutes, but it still felt slow. I was not really into this one. Great atmosphere, of course. All of these have very beautiful actresses in them. That's kind of a hallmark of Italian films of this period. So I just didn't like it, and I don't have a lot of good things to say. Next up is the film that I thought going in might be the hallmark of the set, and that's The Third Eye, and that's because of the cast, because if for fans of exploitation films from the 60s, 70s, 80s, this has the biggest star, and that's Franco Nero. This is actually a very early role for Franco Nero. This film came out in 1966, and it was just before he played Django in the classic spaghetti western Django. So this is kind of before he really blew up. It's really cool to see him in this movie. This film is a little bit of a Psycho ripoff. Not exactly a ripoff. It's not the exact same movie. It definitely takes its own turns, but it's so clearly heavily influenced by Hitchcock's Psycho. What it's about is Franco Nero is a rather disturbed young man who is extremely attached to his very domineering mother, and he's engaged to a woman who's actually also Erica Blanc, so you get to see her in 2 movies on this set, which is pretty cool. But the mother is very jealous. The housekeeper is very jealous as well because she's in love with Franco Nero. And and this is the beginning of the movie, so maybe a slight spoiler, but I gotta set up the film. At the beginning of the movie, the housekeeper kind of accidentally murders the mother, and Erica Blanc gets in a car accident and dies. So in one day, he loses his mother and his fiance, and this movie is his mental breakdown into becoming a serial killer and about his demented, extremely toxic relationship with his housekeeper, who is in love with him. And I liked this movie. I thought it was solid. The Psycho influences are super on the nose between the mother stuff, and he's a taxidermist. A lot of the settings look a lot. I think they even kind of refer to him as Norman Bates on the back of this Blu-ray. Yes, they do. So it's a very Norman Bates type thing. Franco Nero is, as a friend of mine said in his Letterboxd review, acting his brains out in this movie. He's very over the top. He's really emotional as he's going through this breakdown. It's pretty entertaining to watch. And in the first act and into the second act, I thought it was great. I thought it might be my favorite. The third act petered off for me. A lot of the third act involves just a couple of characters driving, and it feels like the movie kind of comes to a halt and leads to an ending that's ambiguous, but not ambiguous in a terribly satisfying way. And I wasn't a big fan of the way the movie ended. Now, apparently this movie was actually remade in the late 70s by Joe D'Amato in a film called Beyond the Darkness. And apparently it's a very much a pretty close remake of this film, but really ups the perversity and the visceralness. So it's the violent and sexual aspects of this film that this film definitely has are just way more explicit in that version. So I hear. I have not seen it, but I'm kind of curious too. I'm curious to see this movie, but just with all of the disturbing stuff cranked up. I don't know. I'm curious. So yeah, it's a pretty good movie. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. Next up is probably not quite my favorite of the set, but I would say is the most interesting. And that is The Witch. And honestly, if any one of these movies was the reason that I bought this set, this would be the film, because I'm actually a huge fan of witch movies. I'm a big fan of the genre. I'm fascinated by the history, the folklore, even some of the real life modern practices of witches. I find it all very fascinating. And I've been on kind of a kick lately of seeking out witch films, particularly old classic witch films. So I was really interested to watch this movie. It's modern day set. It stars Richard Johnson, who you might know from The Haunting, the classic haunted house film, The Haunting, Lucio Fulci's Zombie. He's a little bit of a big actor, and it's pretty cool to see him in this movie. But he is a playboy, man of the world in the 1960s, who runs into a kind of creepy old woman, gets kind of drawn into her house. And in that house, as he's talking to this old woman, he meets her daughter, who is an incredibly beautiful, alluring woman. And he is immediately extremely drawn to her. And pretty much the whole movie takes place in that house, and that he just can't leave as he becomes more and more obsessed with the daughter, as he is wanting to be with her sexually, but she's teasing him and holding him back. The relationship, or perhaps duality, of the mother and the daughter becomes very apparent and very creepy. And by the end, by the third act, this becomes a very satisfying witch film. A very good one with a lot of really creepy stuff, a lot of classic hallmarks of witches. Witches are often depicted with a lot of transformation motifs, and this movie definitely has that. Very, very cool stuff. Now, the problem with this movie, the Achilles heel, is it's 110 minutes, an hour 50. The rest of these are all under 90 minutes. This one is an hour 50, and it's a problem. I would say of all these movies, this has the highest highs. This has the best moments, and the ending hits so hard and is really cool. And it's a problem that it takes so long to get to the good stuff. The first half of the movie is so much casual conversation that is kind of interesting and not bad, but my God, could it have been tightened up so much to get to the really good, spooky, ramped up horror of the third act. If this movie could be trimmed down to around that 80 minute runtime like the rest of these movies are, I think this would be my clear favorite. I think this would be a little bit of a new classic for me because the highs are so high. The psychological stuff going on in this movie is so interesting. The witch content is so creepy. The acting across the board is really, really strong. Richard Johnson is a very good lead. This woman that plays the daughter is fantastic. And the creepy old woman, excellent actress. There's so much going for this movie. Now, I will say that this disc does have my favorite special feature on here, and the one that is so memorable to me because it's a video essay about witches. Miranda Corcoran is the author and academic who does the video essay, and it's so fascinating how it deals with the history of witches, how they're depicted in film, how it relates to this movie. It's so insightful. For a person like me, it's just very interested in that topic. I thought it was really fascinating. And that special feature is one of the hallmarks of this entire set for me. So I thought this movie, I gave it 3 stars. It could have been so much higher, but man, the runtime was just such a problem for me. And when I think about going back to this movie, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle because there's so much you have to wade through to get to the really interesting stuff. Oh, but I also have to note that this movie was directed by the guy who directed Amityville Horror 2, The Possession. So that's pretty cool. All right, folks, there you go. My thoughts on the Gothic Fantastico box set from Arrow Video. Hope that wasn't too terribly long-winded, but I really want to talk to you about these movies. Now, I told you I would say at the end, which of these 2 do I recommend? Well, to get the full context of my thoughts on this film, I invite you to check out that video. I'm not going to dive into that at this time. But I would say, as far as packaging, I would go with this set. I prefer the slide in the side packaging rather than the open up the top, but that's just a personal preference. But also the Arrow Video set comes with a poster and a booklet, which is a big deal. And this doesn't have any of that. As far as the movies, I would go with this one because the highs are higher. And this one has a mix of the black and white 60s films and the color 70s films. Both things I love. This you're only getting 1/2 of that. Here you get a sample of both. And the highs are just higher. There is nothing in this set that stands up to Scream of the Demon Lover or Lady Frankenstein for me. I think those, of all of these films, those 2 are the best. But also this has Monster of the Opera and The Seventh Grave, which both aren't that good. This one only has 1 film I don't like. I would say this one has 3 that I do like. So perhaps more consistent, but higher highs. So that's what I would say. I would say if you're one to get into classic Italian Gothic horror, I would grab this one. But I really recommend both, honestly. I mean, if you're a weirdo like me, I'm really happy to have both. So that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Dust off the like button to give this video a like because it really does help out the channel, and subscribe if you want more videos like this. We're going into the spooky season. I've got a lot of horror, spooky themed videos that I want to do that I'm so excited about. So if you're interested in that, give us a subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. With all that said, don't forget to enjoy yourself today. Have some fun. I'll see you next time.